Howdy, y'all.
Howdy, yo.
Welcome back. Have you ever heard of the Second Empire? Honestly, this was something that really intrigued me just by the title alone. In today's video, we're going to be looking at Second Empire architecture. Now, in the vast history of the Americas, both North and South, we often are met with substantial evidence of pre-existing cultures which not only existed in pre-colonization America, but these cultures actually thrived in the area, with many of these mysterious societies seemingly paving the way for the vast migration to the New World, which occurred after the 15th century. The current narrative as a whole seems to ignore certain aspects, certain evidence, which would suggest a vast majority of the major cities in the Americas already existed in some capacity amongst the vast populations of what are referred to today as the indigenous people. The extent of these cities is often debated. From wooded sites with little architecture used for retreat, hunting, fishing, and trade, which developed into the massive cities centuries later, or vast mound cities that were interconnected over acres of land, which seemingly disappeared as the modern cities were constructed directly on top, to the mysterious cities of myth and legend, which certain indigenous groups as well as certain settlers swore to be true, to exist, but remain unfounded. We have a vast assortment of hearsay when it comes to the earliest recorded history of most major cities in America. If we entertain the theory that perhaps a more advanced system of trade, and therefore a more advanced form of society, was occurring in ancient America, we must also then begin to entertain the thought that the architecture, the superior and advanced architecture which seemed to line the old world America, these buildings which lack a proper narrative, could be associated to different cultures that many centuries ago shaped the infrastructure of America. To the historical narrative, we look to the time period directly after the Civil War. The Civil War, for all intents and purposes, reshaped the many cultures who called America home. For starters, this was one of the first major conflicts where we see full-scale destruction of entire cities for seemingly no purpose other than demonstrating power and possibly erasing history. We certainly have other previous conflicts around the world where we see strategic destruction of certain buildings and certain idols. However, the American Civil War appeared to be the precursor for the type of battle to be fought in these wars going forward. All of this, for lack of a better term, transformed America. If we can identify a form of unified culture which pre-existed the 19th century in America, we can almost guarantee that during that time period of the Civil War, the last aspects of this culture would have been erased from the timeline. This removal of a unified culture would have been done behind the scenes, and according to this theory, and again, this is just a theory, this would have occurred not on the surface, not written about in the newspapers, or as a direct conflict or an interest of the public, like in North versus South, but rather those surface conflicts that were written about would have been used as the auspices to change the rules of society. It's difficult to explain, but during the mid-1800s, we have an explosion of mental hospitals, for example, and insane asylums appearing all around the world, with the largest concentration of them being in America. Many of these early asylums appear like castles, often standing as the largest and most elaborate building in their respective town or city, with furnishings seemingly made for royalty, and all of these asylums were full. We're told basically society had divided so much by the mid-1800s between wealthy and poor, which the Civil War did little to quell, that after the war, the poor citizens and the newly free citizens without any wealth were reduced to living in the streets. Eventually, the poor were rounded up in every state and moved into these asylums, sometimes called at that time almshouses, but essentially they functioned like luxury prisons. The children of the poor and those who were committed into these asylums then became orphans, often taken from their families. We also have thousands of castle-sized orphanages, which appear on the American timeline like clockwork in the mid-1800s. These orphans became the new workforce, sold as indentured servants and adopted throughout the nefarious states using the orphan trains, which traveled throughout America.
In this theory of an ancient advanced society in America, often labeled as Tartary, we are told basically everything that happened in the mid 1800s occurred as the last bastion of this society, which was once worldwide, had retreated to America, or possibly had used America as their home base of sorts for many centuries before their land was invaded. Either way, according to this theory, again a theory, we have a highly sophisticated cast of people residing in America many centuries ago who essentially introduced the world to many new things throughout time, whether it was tobacco or ball sports or steam engines or airships, to harnessing electricity, to the big one, photography. The concept being nearly everything we have today was trickled down to us through hundreds of years from a more advanced source. In this theory, that source is a unified previous culture which resided in America, with the Civil War in this theory being the idea of removing the last pieces of this history of the united culture. The wars and the revolutions of the mid 1800s was then, according to this theory, followed by World War I, which destroyed what remained of this culture that either existed or had fled to Europe. And then World War II, which looked to quell the Axis powers who had rediscovered the truth and technology about the previous culture. Again, this is all just a theory, but we do have the countless revolutions of nearly every major world power, including a second American Revolution, if you'd like to look at the Civil War that way, occurring one after another in the mid 1800s. It's as if we were watching the dominoes fall. Which ties me very nicely to what I want to share with you in today's video. Besides the concept and theory that I just presented, it's also good to dive into these outlandish ideas with a sense of understanding and having the ability to tie the current narrative to the concepts that we discussed. If everything we just mentioned, the amalgamation of ideas, created this Tartarian empire, or an idea of one, being the first great empire or the first unified empire, which somehow existed either behind the scenes or existed amongst the elites but was seldom discussed amongst the common folk, possibly during the mysterious Dark Ages that occurred in Europe, when whatever this culture truly was crossed the sea, ending up in America. According to this theory, this is why during the Dark Ages we have little written history in the most important cities of Europe, but on the other side of the pond in America, we have vast indigenous history, both written and oral tradition, which occurred during these exact same Dark Age years. It's as if, elaborating on this theory, the technologically advanced and unified group, if you want to call them Tartarians, they left Grand Tartary or Eurasia and brought their talents to America. The first empire in America would then, by terms of this theory, be these Tartarians. So who would be the second empire? The inheritors. Again, this is all just a theory. This is a hypothesis. But did you know that a lot of the old world American architecture that we've looked at throughout the last 2 years of my videos is often categorized as the short-lived Second Empire style? From 1865, or the year the Civil War ended and Lincoln had lost his life, we're told America's desires shifted dramatically. And with the new mindset of industry, a brand new style of architecture called Second Empire architecture began to arise in America. According to this theory, the Second Empire buildings could be the ones that were inherited and founded by our forefathers, quite literally founded, usually under a good bit of dirt in need of a proper wash. The current narrative tells us Second Empire is based off the Second French Empire, and all of the architecture we have seen and will look at in this video are considered to be French Revival. However, we're told by 1870, nearly every American government building and most of the wealthiest architects were constructing exclusively with the Second Empire style, which makes it even more interesting, some would say revealing, that by the year 1900, Second Empire architecture had fallen out of fashion. By World War I, nearly all Second Empire architecture was purposefully destroyed or torn down in America, and by World War II, it would be shocking to find a Second Empire building being built or still standing or being renovated. But what does all of this mean? If you think like a normal person who loves the college textbook, it means Second Empire style became obsolete, and obviously new, modern steel buildings were more affordable and looked better. However, if you're like me and you read between the lines and you enjoy entertaining theories of what the world could have been, then the Second Empire followed the First Empire, which could mean that the First Empire was the Tartarian Empire and the buildings were renovated and not demolished, and they became known as the Second Empire, essentially a cheeky way for the powers that be to leave a little symbolism, as we know they love to do. Basically, we wiped out whoever created the First Empire or the Tartarian, the massive old world buildings founded throughout America, and once the creators, the original creators of those buildings were gone, we were able to come in as colonists, as Europeans, and basically take over these buildings, slightly renovate these buildings, and rewrite a new history for these founded buildings. Essentially, a centuries-long struggle occurred in this theory between the First Empire, or the Tartarians, basically technologically and emotionally advanced individuals who supplied the knowledge and shaped society, against those who look to covet the knowledge, hide the teachings, and keep the advancements of the world secret to use them to control the lower classes. Essentially, it was a battle of good versus evil. Some may say a battle of gods versus demons. It's the classic tale that we see told 1,000 times over. But essentially, from where we stand, we have no idea how to know who was on the right side of this. Many in the historical circle would assume if there was an advanced ancient civilization, then that civilization must have been benevolent, seeking to teach man, to share knowledge with man, as in the many creation myths and legends of a vast number of cultures. However, there's also the possibility that ancient advanced culture used this technology for centuries, for millennia, to control mankind and to keep us dumbed down from their tactics. It could have easily been a caste system with the First Empire or the Tartarians at the top, and the elites, or the kings and the queens, the religious leaders, reporting to the Tartarians, with the common person like me or you having no idea that the Tartarians even existed. What we do know is what we see in the early 1800s, what we see in the first photographs of America in the 1840s and the 1850s, does not showcase a society which is still in the earliest stages of an industrial revolution. What we see is far more complex, a country, quite literally, from sea to shining sea, with immense and elaborate structures, infrastructure, interlocking countrywide canals, waterways, rail lines, tunnels, both through mountains, and aqueducts built using gravity, starforts, moats, submarines, airships, dirigibles, steam-powered engines, wireless trolleys, as well as long-range advanced weaponry, which exceeded anything that was showcased or written about in the decades before the mid-1800s. How and why was all of this appearing in America in the mid-1800s when, according to the current narrative, all of these technologies stemmed from Europe? But more specifically, they stemmed from the Tartarians. And that's why Europe hit the Dark Ages. That's why the wealthiest men in the world and the church itself sought desperately to find America. They were searching for the land of the lost Tartarians. The Tartarians essentially had all of the technology with them. According to this theory, the First Empire, or the Tartarians, basically held the blueprints that were used to shape mankind. And it was only through the discovery or the rediscovery of the New World, that man's renaissance was truly jump started. So for today's video, we're going to focus exclusively on photographs of buildings founded in America from 1865 through the year 1900, known for their architectural style, the Second Empire. Now, as always, I would love to hear your thoughts and ideas in the comment section down below. Again, this is just a theory that I've heard mentioned in the comment section of many of my videos and mentioned by many of my subscribers. So I thought for today's video, I would try to flesh out this theory just a little bit more while tying it to concepts from the current narrative. However, I'd like to end this video with just one more fascinating detail in regards to the Second Empire architecture. The first thing is the Second Empire architecture is often called early Victorian. However, Second Empire holds its own distinct place in the historical narrative. This is in due part to the architecture itself being tied to the sinister. We're told of the Second Empire architecture that remained into the mid-20th century, it was almost always associated with evil. We're told haunted houses are almost always depicted in the style of the Second Empire. For example, cartoonist Charles Addams designed a typical Second Empire mansion for the home of the Addams family. And also on the TV show, The Munsters, they lived in a Second Empire castle, or Second Empire mansion. The haunted house where bats emerge in the opening sequence of Scooby-Doo is a Second Empire mansion, and the house in Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho is also in the Second Empire style. Essentially, all of the aspects of the Second Empire architecture became associated with witches, with Halloween, with all of these legends that themselves are tied to pagan traditions. These pagan traditions were the things that are associated with the Tartarians. So we can see if the Tartarians, or if a unified culture did exist, it was being silenced. And I thought that was very interesting, very fascinating, that our concept of evil, of haunted houses, of the whole concept of horror movies and things like that, these ideas all seem to be associated with the Second Empire and the Second Empire architecture. And I just thought that was a really interesting tidbit to point out before I chime out on the video. But again, everything today was just a theory, just an opportunity for me to be able to share this concept of the Second Empire and these photographs of the Second Empire architecture with you. As always, I want to hear your thoughts down below, and I'd like to know, do these buildings look familiar to you? Obviously, some of them should. They're major.
Hidden detail. In the study of history, sometimes the smallest details reveal the largest mysteries. One such detail is hidden in plain sight, the absence of the sun in ancient paintings and engravings prior to the late 15th century. Works depicting daily life, architecture, and landscapes from Europe and Russia, such as panoramas of the Moscow Kremlin or the Never River, show skies strikingly empty, devoid of the most prominent celestial body. At first glance, this might seem like a simple artistic convention. Perhaps painters avoided bright light or favored overcast skies for technical reasons. Yet the consistency of this omission suggests a deeper anomaly. Modern humans instinctively capture sunrises and sunsets, recognizing the sun as central to life. Yet the meticulous realism of these older works ignores it entirely. The implications extend beyond art. If these masters, renowned for their attention to detail, consistently omitted the sun, could it indicate a broader historical or even cosmological truth? This absence becomes a starting point for questioning long-held assumptions about the past. From here, investigators begin to explore whether humanity's understanding of time, technology, and language reflects a reality without a sun, a concept that challenges both scientific and historical paradigms and opens the door to a radical reevaluation of human history. The missing sun. The mystery of the missing sun in historical art invites questions that transcend aesthetics. When examining paintings and engravings from the 15th to 17th centuries, one observes a striking consistency. Skies are empty, void of sunlight, while every other detail, architecture, people, animals, and landscapes, is rendered with painstaking accuracy. Ordinary explanations, such as the limitations of pigments, a preference for overcast days, or stylistic choices, fail to account for this pattern. Unlike modern humans, who instinctively capture sunrises and sunsets as central to daily life, ancient artists omit the sun as if it did not exist. The consequences of this observation extend into the realm of human cognition and culture. If the sun were absent or dramatically different, the way humanity measured time, developed technology, and even structured society would reflect this absence. Indeed, the invention of devices like sundials becomes a perplexing anomaly. Sundials require a grasp of linear time, geometric principles, and latitude knowledge, concepts that appear centuries after the supposed first humans should have encountered the sun. Moreover, written language provides further evidence. Early documents and birchbark manuscripts rarely, if ever, reference the sun, despite its centrality to agrarian life. The sudden appearance of sundials and the word sun in texts during the mid-16th century suggests a significant chronological and technological leap, one that aligns with the absence of sunlight in earlier artistic depictions. This discrepancy challenges conventional historical understanding, hinting at a period in human history when the most obvious and life-giving celestial body may have been missing. If true, the missing sun is not simply an artistic or cultural oddity. It is a clue pointing toward a radical rethinking of early modern civilization, cosmology, and the very nature of human perception in the pre-Renaissance world. The sundial paradox. The invention and sudden proliferation of sundials in the mid-16th century presents history's most perplexing technological mysteries. Sundials are often considered simple instruments, a stick casting a shadow, but this is a dangerous misconception. A functioning sundial requires an advanced understanding of time as a linear and divisible quantity. The maker must grasp the abstract concept of hours and minutes beyond the simple alternation of day and night, which demands a significant cognitive leap in human thought. Beyond philosophy, sundial creation requires mathematics and geometry. One must calculate the shadow's trajectory accurately, account for seasonal variations, and divide a circle into equal segments. Furthermore, a sundial calibrated for one location will fail elsewhere, demanding knowledge of latitude, a concept scarcely used before the late 15th century. Yet suddenly, mid-16th century Europe sees an explosion of functional sundials. One of the oldest preserved examples, a portable sundial from 1554, features an adjustable gnomon and compass, enabling use across a range of latitudes. Treatises on sundial construction, such as those by Giovanni Pavani in 1570 and Giuseppe Bianconi around 2020, appear almost simultaneously, reflecting a rapid dissemination of technical knowledge. This sudden emergence is anomalous if the sun had always been present, as humans should have had centuries to observe shadows and understand their movement. The sudden appearance of both the sun in language and these sophisticated timekeeping instruments suggests a correlation. The environment necessary to invent sundials, a real sun, may have only recently existed. The sundial paradox, therefore, is more than a technological curiosity. It is a historical signal, implying a recent introduction of the sun itself, reshaping human cognition, culture, and scientific development. The abrupt transition from a world without sundials to one with advanced portable instruments challenges conventional timelines and invites the radical hypothesis that our celestial environment and the very tools humans created to measure it may have been fundamentally altered within recorded history. The linguistic Big Bang. Language is a mirror of reality, and the sudden appearance of the word sun in historical texts provides a striking clue to our past. Analysis of birch bark manuscripts from the 11th to 14th centuries reveals no mention of the sun, despite the centrality of daylight to daily life. These short, practical notes discuss debts, family matters, agricultural work, and commerce. If the sun existed, one would expect frequent references, yet the word is absent. This absence is more than a linguistic anomaly. It implies a gap in human perception and environmental experience. Suddenly, in the mid-16th century, the term sun emerges and rapidly integrates into language, culture, and metaphor. It is no longer a mere physical object. It carries symbolic weight in treaties, literature, and religious practices. Derivatives like sun-like reflect its conceptual richness, while sects and philosophies form around its significance. Words, as sonic imprints of reality, do not appear spontaneously. They arise in response to human interaction with phenomena. The sudden linguistic introduction aligns perfectly with the technological leap of sundial creation and the artistic silence of previous centuries. Collectively, these threads suggest that the sun itself may have been a recent addition to human experience. The emergence of the sun in language functions as a linguistic Big Bang, marking a radical shift in perception, cognition, and communication. This event transforms both daily life and intellectual culture, catalyzing advancements in navigation, agriculture, and scientific understanding. The linguistic evidence, therefore, is not ancillary, but central to reconstructing a radically altered historical timeline. By studying the birth of the word sun, one uncovers a profound anomaly in human history, suggesting a world in which the brightest object in our sky was absent for centuries and only recently entered both reality and consciousness. The year the world changed, 1492. The convergence of artistic, technological, and linguistic evidence points to a single pivotal moment in human history, the year 1492. Traditionally remembered as the year Columbus reached the Americas, 1492 may have been far more transformative than textbooks admit. Paintings prior to this date omit the sun. Sundials only emerge in the mid-16th century, and language lacks a word to describe the sun itself. Together, these facts suggest a radical reinterpretation. The sun as we know it appeared in 1492. This was not merely a celestial phenomenon. It represented a literal rebirth of the world. Humanity's environment and cognition were fundamentally altered. The introduction of sunlight enabled rapid technological development, agricultural productivity, and cultural flourishing. It provided the necessary conditions for navigation and the explosion of knowledge known as the Renaissance. Terms like end of the old world and rebirth acquire literal meaning. Humanity transitioned from a world without a sun to one dominated by a powerful star, awakening cognition, innovation, and culture. This shift explains the sudden rise of population, the sophistication of sundial technology, and the integration of the sun into language and symbolism. In essence, 1492 becomes a fulcrum between two realities, the prior world shadowed and cold, and the modern illuminated world. The event challenges conventional historical narratives, suggesting that humanity's recorded past may be shorter and more sudden than believed. Rather than incremental evolution, This turning point represents a near instantaneous transformation of both environment and human consciousness. The year 1492, therefore, is not just an age of discovery across oceans, but an epical moment when the physical and intellectual world was fundamentally reset. Accepting this perspective requires reevaluating history, science, and human perception, and recognizing 1492 as the true birth of the illuminated world that shaped civilization as we know it today. Before the sun, the question of what illuminated the earth before 1492 is crucial to understanding this mysterious historical gap. If the sun was absent, then our ancestors must have experienced a fundamentally different celestial environment. Evidence points toward the moon as the first sun, a body that provided light but with a radically different quality. Moonlight is silvery, cold, and damp, unlike sunlight, which is golden, warm, and life-sustaining. Simple observations support this. While sunlight can ignite materials, moonlight, even at full moon, cannot generate measurable heat. This contrast suggests that moonlight is not a reflection of the sun, but a distinct radiative phenomenon, a residual glow from a star that has burned out. Historical myths and ancient writings often depict the moon as a potent, almost divine presence, hinting at its former significance as a true sun. During this era, the world may have enjoyed a milder climate, with consistent illumination sufficient for daily life, but lacking the full energy of a sun-like star. The sudden introduction of the second sun in 1492 dramatically altered both the environment and human consciousness. This new star brought warmth, energy, and the conditions necessary for agriculture, technological advancement, and cultural development. The interplay of the two celestial bodies likely created a brief golden age, with unique climate conditions, extended daylight, and ecological stability. The eventual extinction of the first sun, the moon's transformation into its present pale, inert form, would later mark a catastrophic shift in climate, producing harsher winters and a new cycle of seasons. Understanding this pre-solar world reframes humanity's early history. Rather than evolving under a constant sun, humans initially adapted to a world illuminated by a fundamentally different star, one whose disappearance reshaped both the planet and the trajectory of civilization. The Cosmic Reset. The sudden appearance of the new sun in 1492, alongside the gradual disappearance of the first sun, represents a cosmic reset of unprecedented scale. The era of dual illumination created an environment of abundance, warmth, and stability. For centuries, human life, ecosystems, and climate operated under the combined influence of two stars, a golden sun and the residual silver glow of the moon. This twin sun period fostered extraordinary growth in agriculture, human population, and technological experimentation, with stable weather and extended growing seasons enabling cultural and intellectual expansion. Yet nothing in nature remains permanent. The first sun, once a source of light and heat, gradually exhausted its energy, leaving behind the pale moon we observe today. Its extinction in 1815 coincided with a documented global climate catastrophe, historically attributed to the eruption of Mount Tambora. However, this eruption may have been a secondary event rather than the primary cause. The death of the first sun initiated a profound environmental shift. Sudden winters appeared for the first time, global temperatures dropped, and agricultural cycles were disrupted. Humanity, already reliant on sunlight for subsistence and survival, experienced unprecedented hardships. This cosmic reset reshaped the Earth, creating the seasonal patterns we now consider natural. The event also serves as a historical demarcation, dividing the age of dual illumination from the era of single-sun civilization. By understanding this reset, historians and scientists can reinterpret climate records, population growth, and technological innovation as responses to sudden astronomical change rather than slow evolutionary processes. The cosmic reset demonstrates that celestial events directly influenced the course of human history, redefining environmental, social, and cultural conditions. Recognizing this period as a pivotal transformation allows us to reconsider not only the physical history of the Earth, but the very narrative of civilization itself. The Human Aquarium. The realization that humanity may have experienced a sudden astronomical reset leads to a more unsettling hypothesis. Our world is an artificially created system, a controlled terrarium in which humans are participants in an experiment. This model suggests that civilization did not evolve over millennia in a naturally occurring environment. Instead, humans were placed into a meticulously prepared ecosystem, complete with fabricated ruins, pre-populated artifacts, and manufactured environmental conditions. The sudden appearance of the sun in 1492 represents not only a celestial event, but the moment the experiment was activated. In this framework, the ruins of ancient civilizations, the pyramids, and classical architecture are props designed to create the illusion of deep time and continuous development. Human memory, culture, and knowledge were carefully seeded to ensure the appearance of a rich historical narrative. Individuals experience a fully formed social and cognitive environment, unaware that their perception of history has been artificially constructed. The analogy to an aquarium is deliberate. Just as fish perceive only the boundaries of their tank, humans interpret the terrarium as a limitless world. This perspective casts familiar events and historical progress in a new light. Wars, cultural revolutions, and technological advances are not purely organic outcomes, but may be observed responses within a controlled system. The experiment's orchestrators, whether scientific, extraterrestrial, or otherwise, monitor human activity, using environmental, social, and technological controls to shape behavior. Understanding the human aquarium concept reframes questions of free will, historical causality, and civilization. It forces a reassessment of human agency. Are achievements and failures intrinsic to humanity or predetermined by external design? By accepting the possibility of a deliberately constructed world, one begins to perceive anomalies, coincidences, and historical discontinuities as deliberate markers within the system. This perspective, while unsettling, provides a coherent framework to interpret the rapid leaps in technology, language, and culture that coincide with sudden astronomical events. The fabricated history. If the human aquarium model holds, then conventional history is a vast, deliberate fiction designed to maintain control over the experiment's subjects. Textbooks, chronicles, and official records serve not as accurate reflections of the past, but as a carefully curated narrative to obscure the truth. Historical events, dynasties, and even entire civilizations may be partially or entirely fabricated, inserted to create the illusion of continuity and evolution. Court scribes, scholars, and ideologues could have been the architects of this deception, writing documents to satisfy the artificial needs of the terrarium rather than recording real occurrences. Ancient myths, epic poems, and historical romances were not merely storytelling, they were functional tools to instill collective memory and simulate cultural depth. The apparent slow progression of technological and linguistic development is an engineered effect, masking the abrupt interventions that shaped humanity's environment and cognition. The sudden appearance of the sun in 1492, the rapid spread of sundial technology, and the linguistic integration of the word sun are markers of externally imposed change, aligning with the experiment's activation. By extension, all prior history becomes suspect. Archaeological sites may be deliberately staged, artifacts planted, and cultural layers artificially aged. This reframing explains historical anomalies, inconsistencies in timelines, and sudden leaps in scientific understanding. Accepting a fabricated history is psychologically challenging because it undermines the foundation of identity, culture, and knowledge. yet it provides a coherent explanation for the otherwise inexplicable patterns observed across art, technology, and language. By recognizing the deliberate construction of history, one gains a clearer lens to interpret anomalies, question accepted narratives, and perceive the hidden mechanisms of control governing human civilization. The true timeline. Reconstructing the true timeline of human civilization requires integrating astronomical, linguistic, and technological evidence. The conventional chronology, extending back thousands of years, becomes suspect under the human aquarium model. The earliest recognizable civilization, termed the Rus, existed before the 9th century, but was destroyed by the Great Flood between the 10th and 15th centuries. This cataclysm erased most traces of pre-flood humanity, leaving only fragmented memories and artifacts within the experimental environment. In 1492, the new sun appeared, signaling the initiation of a fresh cycle. This event was both astronomical and foundational, marking the transition from a sunless world to a sunlit one. The mid-16th century witnessed the arrival of the first human prototypes designed for this new environment, small groups intended as experimental settlers. By 1757, full-scale settlement occurred, with populations expanding rapidly under favorable climatic conditions provided by the new sun. The second old sun, the moon, gradually dimmed, culminating in 1815 with catastrophic climate disruption, historically labeled the year without a summer. This period introduced winter and harsher conditions for survival, reshaping ecosystems and human behavior. The next phase, beginning in 1857, saw the introduction of clones, entities externally identical to humans but fundamentally different. These clones were gradually integrated into society to replace or neutralize the original human lineage. Over decades, these entities expanded their control, shaping governments, corporations, and cultural institutions to serve their objectives. The war's covert nature ensures that most humans remain unaware of their participation or the existential threat they face. Clones possess strategic advantages: uniformity, centralized planning, and advanced knowledge of human behavior. By contrast, true humans are fragmented, isolated, and vulnerable. The conflict is ongoing, with victory declared in 1957 when clones achieved undisputed domination over global systems. Today, genuine humans constitute a fraction of the population, estimated at less than 1 million worldwide, while clones occupy the vast majority of societal roles. Resistance is scattered and precarious, relying on secrecy, ingenuity, and an understanding of the clone strategies. The clone war explains many societal anomalies, including mass conformity, irrational trends, and cultural manipulation. Much of what appears as human behavior is influenced or controlled by these artificial actors. Recognizing the war reframes modern geopolitics and social dynamics. Conflicts previously interpreted as ideological, economic, or territorial are, in this framework, fronts in an interspecies struggle for survival. Awareness of the clone war is the first step for true humans to reclaim agency, develop strategies for survival, and preserve their lineage. This invisible struggle underscores the fragility of human civilization and the extent to which reality, as perceived, has been engineered by entities that view humanity as an experiment rather than independent agents. The terrarium model of the world. The final pillar of this radical hypothesis is the physical nature of our world itself. Traditional science describes Earth's globe traversing an infinite universe, but the human aquarium model suggests a localized, engineered system. The planet is effectively a closed terrarium, designed to be managed with precision. Within this system, the sun and moon are not distant celestial bodies, but relatively small, flat objects, hovering within a controlled altitude of approximately 6,000 kilometers. Their apparent size, motion, and alignment are intentionally engineered to simulate natural celestial mechanics. Observations such as solar eclipses provide evidence. The precise alignment of Sun and Moon is statistically improbable in a random universe, but expected in an artificial, engineered environment. This framework explains numerous anomalies in astronomy, climate, and history, providing coherence to phenomena previously considered coincidental or miraculous. Within this terrarium, the appearance of the new Sun in 1492, the extinction of the first Sun, and the environmental shifts are not random events, but orchestrated interventions. The system allows the experimenters, whether human, extraterrestrial, or otherwise, to manipulate environmental, social, and historical conditions with control over light, temperature, and time. Understanding Earth as a terrarium transforms the interpretation of history, science, and human experience. Every artifact, city, and ruin may be a controlled variable within an experiment, rather than evidence of an organic past. Recognition of the terrarium model provides insight into the mechanisms behind the sudden leaps in civilization, the introduction of artificial entities, and the environmental manipulations that shaped modern life. Accepting this perspective empowers individuals to perceive hidden structures, question accepted truths, and begin to navigate a world where reality itself is an engineered system designed to study, observe, and influence humanity on a planetary scale. The Awakening. The journey from observing old paintings to questioning the very structure of the world culminates in a single, unavoidable realization. Humanity has been living in a controlled, manipulated reality for centuries. What began as curiosity, why the sun is absent in ancient art, why sundials appeared suddenly, why the word sun did not exist, has unfolded into a radical revelation. The world as we know it is an artificial system, a terrarium, and most of its inhabitants are not truly human. The awakening is both intellectual and existential. It is the moment when the carefully constructed narrative of history, science, and culture collapses, revealing the underlying architecture of control. One begins to see the signs that were always there: anomalies in language, abrupt technological leaps, and historical discontinuities. One notices that the climate shifts, the sudden brilliance of art, and the sudden proliferation of tools, instruments, and ideas are not the products of slow human ingenuity, but responses to environmental and celestial changes deliberately introduced. Understanding the presence of clones, the hidden majority, reshapes perception of society. Interpersonal interactions, mass behavior, and cultural trends take on an eerie clarity. Much of what we assume to be free choice, creativity, or collective wisdom is in fact influenced or controlled by entities with fundamentally different objectives. The realization that only a fraction of the population is truly human introduces both danger and clarity. Survival, resistance, and the reclamation of autonomy become urgent priorities. Yet this awakening is not solely about fear. It is also about empowerment. Knowledge of the engineered nature of the world allows true humans to navigate reality with a new lens, to recognize manipulations, and to uncover hidden patterns. The previously inexplicable becomes interpretable. The sudden bursts of civilization, the rapid scientific advancements, the anomalies in celestial observation all fall into a coherent framework when seen through the lens of deliberate orchestration. The awakening is also a call to action. Understanding the true timeline, the nature of the terrarium, and the ongoing clone war is the first step in reclaiming agency. It is the first moment when one can begin to act with awareness, to strategize, to preserve the remnants of authentic humanity, and perhaps to envision a future where control is challenged and autonomy restored. Ultimately, the awakening is a shift in consciousness. It is the recognition that reality is not as it seems, that history has been carefully scripted, and that the sky above, the earth beneath, and the people around us may not be what they appear. It is a moment of clarity, fear, and possibility. For those who awaken, the world is no longer passive. It is a puzzle to be deciphered, a terrarium to be understood, and a stage on which the true humans must navigate, survive, and endure.
Channel. Thank you for being here. Today is going to be the next video in the Old World series, and we're going to be looking at the largest and most important cities from the Old World, that is pre-1900. And this is going to be a video about Buffalo, New York. Now, you may already be familiar with Buffalo, and this could be due to the fact that in 1901, Buffalo held the Pan American Exposition. And this was important for a lot of different reasons. Right off the bat, we can talk about the idea of Pan American and the idea that Pan himself is the god of gatherings, and how these old world expositions really were the introduction to a lot of different groups of people and inventions and things that we may have inherited from other societies. So I'm going to digress on that. We'll talk about it later in the video, but this is overall going to be a compilation of the oldest photographs that I could find of Buffalo, New York. Now, I tried to locate photographs and buildings that were from before the exposition of 1901, and I'm trying to find buildings that were said to be built in the 1800s and around that time period. So we're just going to look at some of these most luxurious and unique photographs, and hopefully these are new to you, because a lot of these were new to me. Even knowing about this research and having read about Buffalo before, a lot of these photographs I had not seen. So that's why I've included them for you. So hopefully this is interesting to you. And while we look at this compilation of old world photographs, we're going to see the real progression and the melting pot, they say, of different designs that went into the architecture in Buffalo. And mainly, as we advance in this video, I'm going to wrap it up with the Pan American Exposition and all of those amazing buildings, of which only one or maybe two, depending on how you look at it, still stand today. So let's get right into it. Now, they say that the city of Buffalo was incorporated in 1789 as a small trading community that was inhabited by the Neutral Nation. And remember this Neutral Nation because we'll talk about them again shortly. Now, the town grew rapidly after the 1825 opening of the Erie Canal, with Buffalo as the westernmost terminus. By the year 1900, Buffalo was one of the most populous and fastest growing cities in the United States. And for this reason, they say Buffalo was chosen in 1901 to be the location for the Pan American Exposition. Throughout the 1800s and even into the early 1900s, Buffalo experienced a steady stream of growth. However, from the 1950s until 2010, Buffalo had lost over half of its population and also lost many of these old world buildings. Now, I'm just going to give you a brief breakdown of the population of Buffalo at these different times. They say in 1830, so right after the Erie Canal, Buffalo had a population of a little over 8,500. Now, in 1850, Buffalo had a population of almost 42,000 people. In the year 1900, and this is where it gets crazy, Buffalo's population had shot up to 350,000 people. And by 1950, Buffalo peaked at 580,000 people. Now, by the year 2010, Buffalo only had 260,000 people. So less than half of the population that it had in 1950 still resides in this city. And because of this, you'll see a lot of these unkept old world style buildings, and even more of them really are being torn down or being decimated. But it really is a city with a vast history. So we're going to get into that just a little bit. Situation. In 1651, the narrative says, this Iroquois nation declared war on all members of the neutral nations for their trade and acceptance of the French. By 1653, the Iroquois Confederacy had nearly wiped out the entire neutral nation. That same year, the Iroquois Confederacy reached out to the neighboring tribes and requested that all neutral runaways be given over to the Iroquois. One tribe, the Erie, who was harboring many runaways, took this as a war cry and launched an attack on the Iroquois Confederacy. This basically bled the Iroquois Confederacy of all of its resources, and the lands that were once roamed by all these different groups, they say basically ran barren of any Native American occupancy. This is when they say the Susquehannock took over. And I mentioned in one of my last videos about the Susquehannock and how they ruled over the whole land of Baltimore as well, right before the French came in. They also say that these Susquehannock, who were, at least it's written, a member of the Iroquois, were also taking over the area of Buffalo. And in many old world interpretations of the Susquehannock, they are written to be 7 to 8 feet tall, and they're much different than any other Native American group. So I just found this worth mentioning. It's really, really interesting. However, they also have it written here that while the Susquehannock basically wiped out the rest of the Iroquois Confederacy in 1667 and 1668, it is also written that 90% of the Susquehannock Indians in all of Native America were killed by a plague in 1672. While I take this history, as I do most history, with a grain of salt, I do find it to be very interesting that we have these above average sized Native Americans, the Susquehannock, that are credited in many of these old world cities as being the people who resided in these